these higher concentrations of ammonia can lead to poor performance, poor feed conversion, increased susceptibility to viral and bacterial challenges.
Hello, everyone. My name is Doug Korver, and I'm one of the hosts of the Poultry Podcast Show. Welcome to our latest installment. If you find this interview interesting, please let us know by visiting our website at wisenetics.com. You can also learn more about our other podcast segments covering poultry, swine, dairy, beef, feed milling, and pet food. And feel free to suggest a new guest as well if you're interested. Today, our guest is Dr. Brian Fairchild, and he is a professor in the Department of Poultry Science at the University of Georgia. Welcome to the program, Brian.
Thank you, Doug.
It's good to have you here, and we've crossed paths numerous times over the years, and I'm very happy to have this opportunity to have a chat with you.
I've enjoyed it as well. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Maybe how you got interested in poultry, and then through the years, some of the experiences you've had.
Well, I grew up on a farm in North Carolina, and we did have one broiler house. My grandfather ran with Holly Farms. It was a 2-story broiler house. Don't see too many of those nowadays, but we had 2 levels to that. Went to North Carolina State University, where I majored in animal science and poultry science. And on my track through my college career, I found grad school, and physiology has always been my passion. So I went on to grad school and worked with turkey physiology, both my master's and my PhD, specifically reproduction with incubation and hatchability, hatchery type work with turkeys. And then came to Georgia in 2001. I've been here about 23 years.
Your partner in improving animal performance, Berg & Schmidt. They believe the following additives are necessary in the poultry dietary. Functional lipids for an efficient dietary energy management. Phospholipids for emulsification, achieving a better nutrient intake. MCTs to provide energy and modulate the microflora within the intestines and enzymes for elevated use of fibrous materials and byproducts.
Great. So you mentioned, you grew up on a farm that had poultry. Was it something that you were really interested in right from the beginning, or just part of the chores, and it kind of grew gradually?
I would say it was part of the chores mostly when I was younger. And but when I got into college, I applied right into poultry science and did my undergrad in that. Just knew that there was tremendous job opportunities. And at that time, I was actually somewhat on a pre-vet track. And so I had fancied myself as a poultry veterinarian one day. But then I discovered grad school about 3/4 of the way through my undergrad program. And that just really fit my career goals and just the things that I really like to do.
Mm-hmm. So I believe you have teaching and research, but mostly extension responsibilities?
That's correct. I technically I have just an extension appointment and a teaching appointment. And within that extension appointment, there's an expectation for an applied research program, which mine kind of falls under broiler management per se. I got a huge umbrella that I can work with under that area of focus. For anywhere from anything that pretty much affects the environment, we've done work on in the throughout my years here at Georgia.
So is your program directed by, I guess, who directs your program? Is it something where you are responding to industry questions and concerns, or is it something where you have a passion and you're taking that and running with it?
I would say both. I do have my passions that we do follow, and a lot of our students work in those areas, but we also focus on a lot of industry issues as well as we go out working with companies in the field. Something might come up, a simple little question will lead to a grad student project for the next 2 to 3 years. So it's really based on a current need at the time. We try to stay pretty relevant with some of the things that we're working on in terms of what the industry needs today. But at the same time, we've always tried to look through our crystal ball and look ahead a few years at any trends that might be coming down the road where some research would prove beneficial to the industry to have that already in hand
Mhm.
when that situation may pop up in North America, Canada, or US, or anywhere really.
Mhm. So, what drew you to an extension position, and what do you like about that kind of work?
Oh, that is an interesting question. When I applied for positions back after I graduated my PhD, I didn't really have a specific position in mind. I was actually on the fence between academia and industry positions. And when I applied for jobs, I mean, at the time I was just applying for what was available, and it was a little tight at that time. There wasn't a whole lot of availability, and I did get hired here at Georgia, and the extension position was there, and I was fortunate that during my grad school years when I was working on my master's and PhD, I always had a couple of extension specialists on my committees, and so it wasn't that I wasn't exposed to it. I was very familiar with the concept. They made it look very easy. Found that out in my first 3 years on the job that they made it look a whole lot easier than it is. But I like helping people. I like that satisfaction when you get that phone call back from somebody saying, "Hey, we followed your advice. We had the best flock ever." And just things like that really help. I always like seeing the students succeed in our lab. I like watching them develop, and they go out in the industry. They get these jobs and kind of carry the work that we've been doing together here in Georgia. They take it maybe into their companies or they expand on it, and it's just really fun to see that. It's satisfying for me to see that happening.
Yeah, that's great. So, you've covered a lot of different topics in your career to this point, but let's start off talking about air quality. Why is air quality so important for poultry productivity and health?
Well, when we talk about air quality, it's important to kind of define what we mean by air quality. And obviously, probably the low hanging fruit, the one everybody thinks of when it comes to poultry production, whether it's broilers, turkeys, layers, is ammonia. So we have ammonia, we've got carbon dioxide, we've got carbon monoxide. Oxygen, contrary to what a lot of people think, is really not a driving factor in our minimum ventilation rates when we're trying to ventilate these houses. And then one thing that, of course, there's also particulate matter, the dust level, particulate concentrations in the house. We're trying to manage those as best we can. And one thing I think people don't really think of is relative humidity as a form of air quality.
Mhm.
And it does impact air quality. So, going back to your question of why is air quality so important? I mean, it's got a big impact on both bird performance and bird health. We've actually seen there's a number of papers that have been published on ammonia in the literature, and they've shown that these higher concentrations of ammonia can lead to poor performance, poor feed conversion, increased susceptibility to viral and bacterial challenges. And all of that's going to hurt that farmer's bottom line, whenever they're trying to sell. They don't want to be losing a lot of birds because of sickness. We don't want to see a lot of birds coming into the processing plant that we have to condemn because they're showing signs of air saculitis or other enteric or systematic conditions that might cause it to be condemned and no longer fit for human consumption. So we're just trying to. I mean, part of good air quality is getting that full potential out of the bird, as well as ensuring that we keep our efficiency as best as we can when we're trying to get that meat from the farm to the processing plant and on to the customer.
Right. So you mentioned some of the specific challenges. What are some practical things that producers can do to ensure good quality, good air quality?
I'm always going to probably start off with relative humidity control first. I think that is something that we've been in our program here at Georgia. We have done a lot of effort over the years to try to convince people and show people the benefits of doing better about trying to control their relative humidity during the flock. If you look at our house environment and you look at how we raise the birds, we have got these temperature profiles that we're going to put into this environmental controller for the house. And that house is going to operate. We're going to monitor those birds, the conditions in the house. And we do a really good job of keeping our house temperature right along that temperature profile. But if you look at relative humidity, it's all over the place. I mean, you can see it up in the 80% range. You can see it all the way down in the 35% range or lower. So, I mean, there's just nobody's really looking at that. And you go into a lot of the houses, doesn't matter which country I'm in, there is a lot of houses out there that just don't monitor relative humidity. And I'll walk in there and it'll just be muggy, and you can just tell the humidity's really high in that house. And might talk to the manager on the farm and say, what do you think about this environment from a humidity standpoint? Feels okay to me. And I'm like, well, let's get something in here and measure this. And so what we'd like to see people do is try to keep that relative humidity between 40 and 60%. That's our optimal range. If we go above 60%, you're going to tend to see more moisture in the floor, which is going to lead to other air quality issues like ammonia, leads to higher bacterial loads, microbial challenges, possibly in the house. Also leads to foot pad dermatitis lesions, which is not only is it a production factor that they do sell that product, but it's also a animal welfare indicator during animal welfare audits. So the better we do at controlling that moisture in the house, the better the birds have been shown to been proven to do as well. Mm-hmm. And that's probably what I'm always going to start off on. If we do a good job of controlling that moisture, we're going to have better air quality. And it's interesting when you look at some of the newsletters we've written. They're on our website, poultryventilation.com. But you can see we've got a couple of newsletters that just show how ammonia, CO2 will follow relative humidity. So even if I don't have an ammonia meter or a CO2 meter, but I am able to monitor relative humidity, I can do a fairly good job of controlling my air quality in the house. And so what we'd like to do is, like I said, try to keep it in that range. We always say 40 to 60%, but I'm just happy to keep it below 60%. I don't get too excited if I walk into a house and it's 30% relative humidity, because we're brooding chicks and we got a high temperature. And as most people probably realize, as temperature increases, relative humidity is going to decrease. And so it's not unusual to walk into a house in brooding conditions at the beginning of the flock, when we have to maintain warmer conditions for the chicks, to see low humidities. And I don't get too concerned about that, because most broilers, we'll focus on broilers for a minute, and we know that broilers are going to probably increase their body weight 4.5 fold in the first week. which means their water consumption is going to increase 4.5 fold each week, or that first week. And they only retain about 20% of the water that they're consuming, and the rest is put into the environment. So we're going to be adding moisture to that environment relatively quickly. The big thing about low relative humidity when you're brooding chicks is to realize that temperature, relative humidity, and how it affects bird heat loss. You look at a lot of the manuals and you'll say, oh, they say, let's brood these birds at 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. Nobody broods their birds at 86 Fahrenheit. It's always going to be in that 90 to 93, or even maybe higher in some cases. And the reason they do that is because we know the relative humidity is going to be low. Mm-hmm. So to get an effective temperature, which that effective temperature is what it feels like to the bird, and that's a combination of temperature, relative humidity, air movement. I could even say feed status, whether they're fasting or if they've got feed. All of these things come together. Bird density, all of these are affecting that, impacting that effective temperature, what it feels like to that bird. So in order for that bird for it to feel like 86 degrees Fahrenheit to that chick, when the relative humidity's at lower than 50%, we have to bump up the environmental temperature. And that's one of the reasons why we have to brood maybe a slightly warmer temperatures, because we know our relative humidity is lower. And those birds lose a lot of their heat, 60% of their heat, through respiration, just through normal breathing. Mm-hmm. They're not panting when they're chicks, unless, they can if they get hot. But under normal conditions, perfect conditions, they're still going to be losing the majority of their heat through respiration. And if we drop that relative humidity, that becomes even better. I mean, it makes that system work even better at removing heat. So we have to compensate that with temperature. So as long as people understand that relationship and understand, that's why I don't get too concerned. I really don't want people trying to humidify their houses in the first week to get that relative humidity up, because a lot of people refer to that as evaporative cooling. And if I'm trying to keep my house warm and I go trying to humidify the air to bring it down, it's going to drop the temperature. And so you get into this battle of what you need. And so that's probably the first thing I'm going to recommend whenever a grower calls me up and says, I'm having some issues. If we can narrow it down and kind of rule out other issues, disease or viral challenges or anything like that, we will focus on relative humidity. Mm-hmm. And the success we've had with just working with a few growers that do a better job at trying to keep that relative humidity below 60%, it's been encouraging. I've seen enough successes with that to continue to push for this. And of course, if we're doing good at that, we keep the ammonia low. We keep the CO2 lower. And of course, CO2 is coming from the heat system. It's coming from the birds. There might be even a little bit being produced from microbial, and this is a very small fraction, but just through microbial activity in the floor, in the litter. And so we've got to make sure that we remove that CO2. But what we found is if we're doing a good job of removing carbon dioxide, if we're doing a good job of removing moisture and controlling our relative humidity, then we're going to be more than meeting the demands of removing that CO2. The only time CO2 typically becomes an issue in most poultry houses is when we have a very tight house, very little leakage, cold weather, when the heaters are running a lot, and we're using minimum ventilation rates in that first week. Mm-hmm. That's been a few times where we've seen that maybe the relative, when the CO2 concentration could get higher than 5,000 ppm, and we would need to maybe ventilate a little bit more to control CO2. But typically, that's only going to be the first 3 or 4 days, and by that time, there's enough moisture being added to the house through the heating system which a lot of people don't realize. That heating system, not only does it add heat, it adds moisture as well. As you burn propane, as you burn natural gas, moisture is going to be one of those byproducts that's produced. And so all of this is contributing to that house environment and the air quality.
You mentioned your website. Can you just say that again so our listeners can find it?
Yeah, we have our website, and it has got it's poultryventilation.com, and that's a UGA poultry housing website. And we've got, on that website, we've probably got close to 400 newsletters now that date back to the 90s, early 90s. But it's just a good resource for reading. We take those newsletters, and all of it's driven by scientific research, pulling information from the work that we do, from the work that others have done, and we put that together into those newsletters hopefully in a format that people can follow and understand without having to have a PhD or DVM or some engineering degree to follow to understand what we're trying to get across. And so
it's really aimed at producers.
That's true. It is. It is aimed at producers. We see a lot of people use it in training as well for undergrad classes, high school ag classes. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of people that read it. The other thing that's on the website is there are some resources about some spreadsheets that are there, but a lot of those are being converted over to an app. And we do have an app that's geared towards air quality and minimum ventilation as well. Our app is called Poultry 411. And inside that, they've got 5 calculators now. And we're going to continue to expand those as we add more calculators to it. But for this particular conversation, the one that comes up is our minimum ventilation calculator. And it basically is a moisture balance calculator. We use water consumption as a gauge of how much moisture is being added to the house. So we take that water consumption from the previous day, we put it in the calculator, we use the current conditions outside. So let's just say it's 35 degrees Fahrenheit and 60% relative humidity. Inside the house, we'll tell it what the conditions are there. So we will, let's just say it's 85 degrees was our target temperature that day, and our relative humidity, we set our target point. And I'm going to set somewhere, moderate, let's just say around 60%. And that's what we would consider to be a moderate level of moisture control. If we went down to 50, it'd be a little bit higher. And if we went down to 40, we'd have a high level of moisture control. But you plug those numbers in, you tell it how many fans, how much fan power you're running in terms of cubic feet per minute or cubic meters per hour. You can convert it over to metric options as well within the calculator. And it will calculate and tell you, based on those conditions, how long you should run your fans under those conditions to maintain the moisture balance at that specified relative humidity. And so it's been a great tool. I use it a lot when I'm in the field visiting farms. When I go in there and we see that the house might be a little bit too high in terms of moisture. We go look at their controller, look at their settings, plug all that information in with current conditions, and we can demonstrate that, you know what, we should probably be ventilating about 45 seconds more every 5 minutes than what we're currently doing. Mm-hmm. Some other useful things on that calculator would be the house tightness app, which again ties into good air quality, because we want our air to enter in through the inlets. We built these houses tight so that we don't have a lot of air leakage. So we want to direct where that air enters, and usually it's up near the top of the sidewall, near the ceiling, and we're going to move that cooler air with higher moisture content. We're going to move that across the ceiling, and as we warm that air up, we increase the moisture holding capacity. So even if it's raining outside, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 100% relative humidity, we bring that air in, we warm it up. For every 20-degree increase in temperature, we cut the relative humidity in half. So even on a cool, rainy day, we can get moisture out of that house. And so, but the key is bringing as much air through the inlets as we can. And so another calculator on here is our house tightness calculator, where people can close up their house, turn on some fan power. We try to get at least one CFM per square foot if we can, but it's hard to do that with different house sizes, different fan sizes. And that's where the calculator comes in, is it makes that adjustment for the user. So they don't have to have 1 CFM per square foot. And then you plug in that static pressure test results that you got, house dimensions, and it's going to calculate how many square footage of or square meters of leakage area you have in that house. It shows you, doesn't tell you where those leakage areas are. That's another whole long conversation, but you know that there's room for improvement in that house, and you can go from there. It also gives you on that same calculator, you go a little bit further, tell it what kind of inlets you have, the size of the inlets, how many of the inlets, and it will give you a rough estimate based on that leakage of how much of that air, when your fans turn on, is actually coming in through your inlets. Is it only 50% of the air, or is it 85 to 90% of that air?
All right. That sounds like a really useful tool. And that can be downloaded from the App Store?
Yes, it's available on both the iOS, the iPhone system, as well as the Android system. So I believe that's called Google Play Store.
Okay, great. I'd like to remind our audience that if you find this or any of our previous topics worthwhile and informative, you can subscribe to the Poultry Podcast Show YouTube channel by clicking on the bell icon to receive our notifications. You can also share the video if you learned something new today. So coming back to our discussion about ventilation, I have a couple of questions. One is, with an increasing use in coccidiosis vaccines, we also have to have a certain level of humidity in the barn in order to get good cocci-cycling and effective antibody production. Is that low level of humidity that you talked about a concern, or how do we deal with those maybe competing situations?
Yes. Well, it is a concern. Obviously, we're getting a little bit outside of my area of expertise, but we have had discussions with people who have had trouble in other areas where very cold weather, run the heat a lot. We have to keep warmer temperatures, and that temperature differential between outside and inside is large.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we bring in that air, we can remove a lot of moisture from that house in those conditions like that. So we have run into situations where they say the houses were too dry, and when they did a cocci vaccination, they weren't getting proper sporulation and cycling of the cocci. And one of the things that they did to compensate for that is they would put paper down on the floors.
Mm-hmm.
I'm imagining it's probably near the feed lines or around feed lines, water line area. And the manure, as the birds, moved around that paper, they would drop it, and you got the birds coming in there pecking at it, just kind of getting that cycling going on. That seemed to help with the situation.
Mm-hmm. So basically creating a localized area of higher humidity so those the parasites can cycle.
Right. Or at least having that manure there so it's not drying out so quickly when it hits that dry litter.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's very helpful. And you've addressed this as well. So on the other end, when we have older birds and they're eating a lot, they're drinking a lot, they're putting a lot of moisture into the environment, into the barn environment. How do producers get rid of that excess moisture?
This is we're getting into a little bit of an area that's a bit of a pet peeve of ours right now. And the pet peeve part is that we as an industry, and it doesn't matter pretty much where you go, a lot of people rely too much on their evaporative cooling systems in hot weather.
Mm-hmm.
And just like we talked about how when we warm the air up and we make the air drier and it helps us out in wintertime to get that moisture out. Well, in hot weather, when we try to cool the air down using evaporative cooling, we increase the moisture level in the air. And so the people that they're turning on their evaporative cooling too soon are going to just raise this relative humidity up in the house. And how did we talk about how do birds lose heat? One of the main ways is through respiration.
Mm-hmm.
And by raising that humidity up, we compromise that heat loss mechanism that they have. The other main way that we're removing heat from those birds is airspeed. As we move air over the bird, we're going to be pulling heat away from that bird and getting it out of the house. And we also create a wind chill effect. And so on a good day, with 600 feet per minute, that's about 3 meters per second. A lot of houses are pulling more than that nowadays. It could be 3.5, up to even 4 meters per second, or around 800 feet per minute. It's the airspeed that's doing most of the cooling, not the evaporative cooling. We can't cool birds with evaporative cooling alone. You've got to have that air movement. And so what we want people to do is wait. Don't turn on that evaporative cooling until the house air temperature is around 85 degrees. And that's a hard thing for some people to do. They are turning the evaporative cooling on a lot sooner, maybe because it's the old adage, more is better, I guess, just not in this case. So it'd be nice if, one of the goals that we are trying to do, and a lot of our educational programs, you'll see it on the website. We really do promote trying to delay the onset and use of those evaporative cooling until we need it around 85 degrees. So the other thing that we're doing in those houses is when we go into tunnel mode, ventilation mode, and we're moving that air down the house, we're exchanging the air in that house in a minute or less, depending on length of the house, airspeed, and everything. But we're exchanging that air in that house, which, even though the relative humidity when we're at that stage may be high, we're moving a lot of air through the house, and it helps to dry it out, keep it dry. We're not leaving that moisture in there to settle into the bedding material, or by moving that air over that litter, it helps to dry it as well. So that's what we're trying to do towards the end of the flock.
Okay.
We're getting back into that, kind of along our theme of discussion here about climate control and relative humidity. There are things that we can do at the end of the flock, even in hot weather, by controlling that evaporative cooling. And of course, there's other things too, like good drinker management. It's some pretty low hanging fruit when you walk into the house and you just see these wet areas underneath every drinker, where they've been. A couple of reasons why that might happen. One, maybe the drinker's leaky and it's time to change the equipment, put in a new drinker.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be that they ran the drinker too low and the birds are having to kind of turn sideways and they don't really have a cheek to catch the water. So it just kind of, some goes in and some goes on the floor. And then the other could be that they're running their pressure too high and it puts out more water than their beak can hold. and so it ends up going on the floor. So by properly managing that drinker system, it can help with our moisture control as well.
Well, thanks for those practical things that producers can keep in mind.
Welcome.
When it comes to raising healthy animals, you need more than the right solutions. You need the right partner who brings decades of industry expertise and a global team to put that knowledge to work for the advancement of your operation. At Phibro Animal Health Corporation, we are proud to work with you as your trusted partner.
So we've got a few minutes left in our time together, but I know that you're currently the president of the Poultry Science Association. And what do you think our audience should know about PSA?
Well, if you haven't heard about the Poultry Science Association, its mission is to help disseminate research and educational information to people, throughout the world. It's an international organization. We've got members from all over the world, poultry scientists, not only in academia but in industry as well. And we do hold a annual meeting every year in July, and it moves around. So you have to go to the website. It's poultryscience.org, and there's information there about our meetings. This year it'll be in Louisville, Kentucky, and there it's a good opportunity to go see what's being presented, what work's currently being done at the universities. There's industry people that come in, and they may be working with the universities as well on projects and products and evaluations, and they're going to provide this information to all of those that are attending there. And so it's just a good opportunity. We do also have two journals. There's the Poultry Science Journal, and then there's the Journal of Applied Poultry Research.
And you're the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Applied Poultry Research. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm wearing a couple of hats right now. And the Journal of Applied Poultry Research is so the name's pretty much self-explanatory in a way, and that is that it is applied research. A lot of it's been done in the field. That's where I tend to do a lot of my work at. Very little of the work I do is actually done in research houses or pen trials at the UGA farm. It's going to be out in the field working in commercial houses and with farms here local to us. Matter of fact, we were starting another trial today on a farm that's about 40 minutes here from campus. But these articles go into the journal here. They're available online. Both journals are open access. So, if we were having this webinar 5-6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, I can't remember off the top of my head, but we would have said, well, in order to get that information, you need to be a member of PSA. Well, today you can go and click on any of those articles, and they're open access. They're available to everyone. And it's just a good resource. I mean, there's articles in both journals on nutrition, genetics, breeding, management, food safety, immunology, intestinal health related type research as well. I mean, it's just anything that you can think of when it comes to poultry research for trying to produce eggs and poultry meat as efficiently as possible and keep the birds healthy while we're doing that, to get that full potential out of those birds. It's going to be there. You're going to find an article on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great resources for not only poultry researchers, but as you mentioned, for the industry as well. And having been a regular attendee at the Poultry Science Association meetings, I can vouch for how interesting those are, and it's a great opportunity for developing collaborations between researchers and industry. For students to make contact with maybe potential future employers. And so I'll echo your your enthusiasm for the Poultry Science
And
Association.
that's a very, very well put. You took the words right out of my mouth with how I was going to say it as well about these collaborations between the academic side and the industry, because it's interesting as you travel around the world visiting with people. You go to some countries and they don't have that interaction between the academic side and the industry side. And it's just really interesting how this organization does help with that. And of course, our members are from both sides. We've got industry meeting, we got academic, we got government. There's all aspects of production that with people come from all aspects of production that are members of the association.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the yearly meeting, typically in North America, in the United States or Canada, but there's also coming up this year the Poultry Science Association Latin American meeting.
That's
That
correct.
will be in October in Brazil.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And this will be our, I believe, I don't know, Doug, do you remember? Is this our third Latin
It's the
American meeting?
third or fourth, I think. It might be the fourth.
But this is going to this will be my first opportunity to attend. I'm going to go this year myself. So hopefully we'll get to see some of our viewers down there as well whenever we make it down to Brazil in October.
Yeah. Well, Brian, I know you're extremely busy. You've got a lot of different responsibilities that you do, and you do a very good job of. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to talk with us.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed it.
And thank you to our audience. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a thumbs up on the platform you're using to view the podcast. I'm Doug Corver, and I'll see you next time on the Poultry Podcast Show.